Okay, hello everyone. Hello again. Good to be back up on stage. Although it is intimidating to fill in for Stu Witt, I feel a little bit like a pinch hitter who's been called in for David Ortiz or something along those lines. But thankfully, Stu had signed up for a session that didn't have any question and answers, so I don't have to worry too much about you all giving me your best fastball on this. I am going to do my best to fill in on a topic that I'm nowhere near as well-versed as Stu is, but I'm relatively well-versed, and I've been doing a lot of homework over the course of the last 24 hours to try and give you a good presentation about the current status, about a piece of regulation that I think really impacts this industry. Certainly it impacts us at Virgin Galactic, but I think essentially all of the speakers that you've heard over the past couple of days, or that you're going to hear over the next few hours, have been impacted over the past couple of years by something called the CSLA, the Commercial Space Launch Act, and its various amendments. And there's some real ongoing activity in that field right now in the tropical paradise of Washington, D.C. The main aspect of this that most people talk about, and what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about, is something that's commonly referred to either as the learning period or as the moratorium, depending on which side of the table you sit on sometimes. And for those of you who don't have any background on this, a quick origin story for this. This was, I think, a really wonderful way that our congressional leaders showed some foresight about the growth of this industry, all the way back in the heady days of the Ansari X Prize, the flights of Spaceship One, and a lot of the other burgeoning activity that was happening in that era. They recognized that space is about to be democratized, that we're about to have not just a national government space program, but a variety of private space programs, and we'll be flying people of all different shapes and sizes on a variety of different vehicles that fly a number of different flight trajectories with a number of different safety systems and a lot of other features. And they also recognize that space carries some inherent risk in it. You know, it's difficult to imagine anything getting up to Mach 3, much less Mach 20, without carrying some risk on it. For goodness sake, I feel terrified when I go downhill skiing, and I don't know, I'm probably going 20 miles an hour maybe. Some skier will correct me on that, I'm sure. So they recognized that we needed to create a regulatory regime that did protect people. It protected those people who were not on the vehicle itself, those people who happen to live near a spaceport or work near a spaceport, but allowed those people who were willing to step up as the earliest customers of these vehicles to become educated consumers and to choose to take some risk upon themselves. I personally prefer the term learning period to moratorium because it's not an absolute moratorium. In fact, the FAA has some full abilities to pass regulations that do impact passenger safety. The thing they can't do those is sort of pass those in the absence of any data. They have to do those in response to an accident or in response to a near miss. If they find out something that any company in industry is doing or has done that could have put the spaceflight participants on board the vehicle in danger, then they can come in with a rule to prevent other companies from repeating the same mistakes. But they can't just say, well, Space Shuttle flew it this way, so all of you must fly it this way. Because there was a recognition that what worked for Space Shuttle might not work for Spaceship Two, and what worked for Spaceship Two might not work for New Shepard or Lynx or any other vehicle along those lines. So that's the situation as it has been since 2004-ish. Originally, all of us in this industry thought that not only Spaceship Two, but many other vehicles would have been flying many flights on many different airframes in the time since. So the thought was that the Congress would give this learning period a number of years, time to rack up a very large body of data from all these vehicles, and then it would naturally expire and give the FAA the ability to start prospectively rulemaking. Obviously, the industry hasn't quite developed on the timelines that we expected back in those days for a variety of reasons. So Congress has found it in the best interest of the nation from time to time to extend those provisions. And we were just in a situation where one of those extensions was due to expire at the end of the government fiscal year. And thankfully, what we saw was both parties in both houses of U.S. Congress coming together to pass a temporary extension of 6 months that was attached to another bill that was addressing a broader topic of FAA's as a whole's authorization, not merely restricted to the space side of the organization, but aviation as well, to give them 6 months to hash out the differences between two bills that have already passed, one in the House and one in the Senate, but which have some differences between the two of them. This is a procedure called conference, where they go and they hash out the two differences between the bills and hopefully draw some compromise and pass a bill. Now, I know in Washington, D.C., compromise does not seem to be one of the leading pastimes of the day. So I think it's a really encouraging sign that, that the federal government not only thought this was worth doing, but thought this was a priority that they had to get to before this learning period expired, enough to at least pass this 6-month extension. You know, given just general dysfunction in our nation's capital, with a government that always seems moments away from shutting down or from cannibalizing its upper leadership, the fact that they could come together and pass this temporary extension, I think, was a good sign. And even a better sign than that is the fact that we have continually seen from congressional leadership on both sides of the aisle and on both sides of the National Mall, on both the Senate side and the House of Representatives sides, we've heard all the right words about the enthusiasm that our congressional leaders have for passing not just a temporary extension, but a much larger extension in the very near future. In fact, I think we've heard Senators Nelson and Smith and Cruz, each of them talk about the idea of being very committed to passing a real bill that doesn't just temporarily address the problem, but addresses it on a much longer basis before the end of this year. So that's certainly something that we are grateful for and very encouraged for. Now, these bills don't only address this learning period issue. They each address the learning period issue, and I think they each address it well. You know, one side extends the period for a little longer than the other side. I think myself and many in industry would probably prefer the longer one, but I think both of them are good solutions, so I'm happy that whatever compromise emerges from them will be good for us as vehicle operators and manufacturers. It will be good certainly for the states that house the spaceports, and it'll be good for the entire supply chain of all the companies that feed into these, to say nothing of all of those in the audience who presumably would like to fly on these vehicles, fly on many of these vehicles many, many times. The passage of this bill should be very good news for all of us. But the bill does address other things in addition to the learning period, and this is where my expertise gets a little dicey, so you'll pardon me for just doing the 50,000-foot view of this, whereas I'm sure Stu could have dove in a little bit more deeply. In many areas, the House bill and the Senate bill are functionally identical, so we can be very confident that something is going to emerge, and we have a general shape and size of what that's going to look like. This touches on a variety of issues that deal with international competitiveness, sort of normalizing how regulations or liability regimes are treated in the US versus how they happen in other countries. That has to do with things like indemnification. It also, I was very happy to see both sides, the bills on both sides had some remarks in there encouraging and addressing industry's voluntary adaptation of standards. And that's a movement that we've heard actually only a little bit about at ISPS this year, although I think we've heard more in past years. And there's actually a really encouraging amount of activity that's going on under the leadership of organizations like the Commercial Spaceflight Federation and others, where you see a lot of these companies that are active in a variety of different sectors of spaceflight, whether it's suborbital or orbital, whether it's just human spaceflight or it's uncrewed spaceflight, whether it's all these different aspects, coming together to ensure that we're sharing lessons and that we're coming up with sensible standards that do make sense, sensible standards that make sense, imagine that, across all these various different vehicle types. So I was happy to see Congress both acknowledging that and encouraging other parts of the US government to sort of work with industry to encourage the adoption of these voluntary consensus standards. Both bills also addressed an issue of licensing and permitting flexibility. Under the current regs, there are actually some weird and in a way counterproductive restrictions that would say if you have a vehicle that is already licensed and you have an idea in your mind for how to make it better, it actually is very hard under the current regs to go back and do new experiments on that vehicle, because doing so would invalidate your license and would put you out of business. And there's not a way to say, well, I've got two vehicles and I'll use one of them as my sandbox and one of them as my commercial service vehicle. I think this is an issue that everyone has recognized that does not make the world safer. Let's go ahead and correct this. And I think both sides, both House and Congress, have taken steps to address that. They've also taken steps to address a variety of non-launch operations and how those are addressed under the regulations. So I think those are all very good things. There are a few other things that are only addressed in one of the bills, they're in the House bill and not the Senate, or vice versa, or are addressed at a substantively different level between the two. Some of them are, I won't call them fringe issues, but they're not universally important to everyone in the industry, although I think all of us are probably fans of them and think they're cool. So these are issues related to things like in-space resources and the mining of those, extension of the ISS lifetime, obviously something that almost all of us in this room probably have a very strong opinion about one way or another, whether or not it's professionally relevant to our companies. And then some more universally relevant issues where they are thrashing out differences on things like jurisdiction for various liability regimes, whether it's a federal liability regime or jurisdiction or a more local jurisdiction. But in quick summary, in my final 9 seconds, I think the future looks pretty good for this bill to pass. Again, as we've been hearing, it's not many issues these days where you hear both sides lining up and saying, this is important, we're in pretty close agreement, we got to settle our differences, we got to pass a bill. And I think this is one of those instances, and I know we're all grateful for that. So thank you very much. I hope I've done an adequate Stewart impression, and enjoy the rest of the session.
Hey, David Ortiz would be pleased.
Yeah, all right.